Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So, did you know that 99.7% of the FISA warrants that are requested are approved? 99.7%. That number is magnificently high. I did not know that that was the case. I learned this maybe a few months ago, maybe a couple of months ago, and it floored me. Because I realized at that moment that I had swallowed a certain amount of propaganda just based on the naming and the words that are used to describe and the way that we talk about it. Calling it a court gives you this impression of an actual court. That you're sitting somewhere, you have a defense, you have a prosecution, something is being argued, and you guys are leaving it up to the judge, this kind of impartial arbiter of events. Nothing can be further from the truth. Ultimately, there's somebody who wants to get their hands on you and rip your life apart. That person who wants to get his hands on you and rip your life apart, that agent is talking to a judge. The only person who's whispering in that judge's ear is that agent who wants to get his hands on you and rip your life apart. There is no counterbalance in this. Ultimately, the judge is hearing from one party. That's it. 99.7% are approved, and you can kind of understand why. If the only information that judge has is coming from the agent who wants to get his hands on you, then you can kind of understand that there's nothing else for the judge to go by other than that particular agent, the person who's giving him that information. And of course, that information is going to seem as if you're guilty. Otherwise, why would the agent be talking to the judge in the first place? 99.7%. That is not indicative of a court. That's indicative of a rubber stamp. There is a magnificent difference in those things. And yet, they call it a court. They call it a court to give it this kind of fig leaf of fairness associated with it. This is literally a secret court. And regardless of what they say, they have been using this for issues other than terrorism. Meaning this parallel construction thing. Benny mentioned this, the CIA guy, where they were talking about they would use the information pulled through surveillance, through this kind of hidden surveillance, secret surveillance, and then deal with the agencies, the local agencies, in order to reconstruct the case parallel to the information, because they can't accept or add that information to the court record. They can't introduce into courts that the way they got their hands on that information and the way they were tipped off to this was through secret proceedings. That doesn't necessarily stop them from using that information against that person, though, providing that information can be constructed in a way where they can create or fabricate a trail of information or a trail of evidence. This concerned me greatly because ultimately, particularly when you look at this case, because it's one thing when they do this on some random Joe Schmo, it's another thing when they do it on a person who's running to be president of the United States. You shouldn't do it in one, you damn sure shouldn't do it in the other. Both cases are bad. But yes, it becomes that much more monumental when you're talking about doing this to the president of the United States, or the person that is to be the president of the United States. It becomes even more worrying when you realize that it's very possible that the Democratic Party was working with the FBI in order to conjure up information in order to do this. Fact is, they should have disclosed, and they didn't disclose before we go too farther from this. Some of the big revelations for the Nunes memo and from the investigation itself, they did not disclose that that dossier came from, essentially, Clinton paid for that dossier. The Clinton Foundation, or Hillary Clinton's camp, paid for that dossier. They didn't disclose that to the judge at all. Again, the only person who's communicating with that judge is the person who wants to get their hands on you and rip your life apart. They didn't communicate that information. They didn't communicate the information that Papadopoulos, the person who gave off that tip in the first place, meaning the Australian diplomat, was also affiliated with Hillary Clinton, or at the very least Bill Clinton, being somebody who gave to the Clinton Foundation, I think $25 million to the Clinton Foundation. The FBI, for whatever reason, did not disclose that the pretext for this FISA warrant came from two things that had links to the Clinton camp. That seems like that would be a big fucking deal to disclose to the judge. Now, it's slightly besides the point, because it's very possible that with a 99.7% approval rating that they would have approved it regardless. But you still have to ask the question, oh, well, wait a minute, they knew about this. Why didn't they disclose this? Why didn't they disclose this? In fact, it was only recently that I learned that the Papadopoulos thing that the people keep bringing up, that tip, that Australian diplomat, was associated with the Clinton Foundation. It's somewhat problematic that this wasn't something that was revealed in the FISA documents. That's the point I'm getting at. Republicans are not crazy for pointing this out, saying, well, wait a minute, it looked like they were abusing their FISA warrant capabilities in order to spy on a political team. That's what it looks like. You add into the fact of, well, how on earth did Hillary Clinton not get perp walked in this situation? I mean, they had her dead to rights. And not just had her dead to rights, Comey came out and lied, saying that no prosecutor would bring charges, even though when Comey is making that statement, Comey is not being truthful in this case, and Comey is changing the standard by which the FBI would typically judge someone in this scenario, being him saying no reasonable prosecutor would do so when a reasonable prosecutor did so a year or two beforehand for the same charges or for very similar charges. This looks slightly shady. That's the point I'm getting at. It looks like they wanted to get rid of a case for one person, meaning protect Clinton, while at the same time trying to implicate Trump, to tar the presidency and delegitimize that particular presidency. I showed in the documents before that going all the way back to 2015, they were talking about slandering or going after Trump because of his Putin and Russia bromance, some crazy stuff like that in one of the Podesta documents. I showed in the book Shattered, where Hillary Clinton, the day after the election, screamed at the top of her lungs that it wasn't me that lost. It was not my fault. I am blameless in this process. It was Donald Trump and Russia and that fucking Comey, but especially Russia. And I need you guys to get out there and scream Russia. Make those people know it. I'm saying that they have a dog in this hunt. And it looks a little bit strange that A, she would walk, and B, similar people show up in the situation of getting her off while at the same token getting Trump on. Now, the question was asked even by Republicans saying, wait a minute, you need to investigate this. This looks extremely bad. Now, the media completely ignores this. It doesn't necessarily investigate this particular angle. The media has made up their mind that Donald Trump is guilty. Russia has something to do with it. And because those things are true, we don't need to pay attention to any of the anomalies that are associated with this case. We can just move on. Jeff Sessions. For the first time, I think I may have positive words to say about Jeff Sessions. He's not moving on. Jeff Sessions seems to have opened up an investigation using somebody who's outside of D.C. in order to look into abuses by the FISA courts. And I think this is a big fucking deal, by the way. Like, I'm not one of these lefties who thinks that the surveillance system or the intelligence systems are fucking awesome just because they don't like Donald Trump. I don't like the intelligence services under a Democratic president. I don't like them under a Republican president. I think these things are antithetical to this idea of a representative democracy. So, yes, I take issue with this. And so, yes, I definitely like this idea that these guys are going to be investigated for potential abuses of FISA. I want to know if this is what takes place. My point here is that if you're looking at this from a particular perspective and you say to yourself, oh, nobody would do that, it assumes that these are not political actors and that the stakes are not massive and gargantuan. The stakes are, you're talking about being president of the United States. You're talking about controlling the political apparatus. How you specifically look at this is not necessarily the same way that these guys look at this in the way in which they operate from a political context. I'm just trying to make this point that there is evidence that does point to this idea that it's very possible that the apparatus of government itself was tilted in the direction of a particular candidate, that candidate being Clinton. And when those things did not necessarily go the way they planned, the secondary plan of tanking Trump kicked into effect. Jeff Sessions is taking up what the Republicans are saying, and he's looking into this. Apparently, he's appointed a special investigator to look into this. So this is, unfortunately, we're dealing with Republicans, so this is Fox News. Jake Gibson works for Fox. Sessions on call for second special counsel. I have appointed a person outside of Washington, many years in the Department of Justice, to look at all the allegations that the House Judiciary Committee members sent to us, and we're conducting that investigation. He mentioned it before, but this is the first time I heard him mentioning anything about somebody outside of D.C. Meaning, they've been asking him. If I'm not mistaken, Gowdy also brought up that we needed a second investigation to look for FISA abuse, issues dealing with FISA abuses. So Sessions makes the point, he's appointed a person who's outside of Washington with many years in the Department of Justice to look into the allegations made by the House Judiciary Committee members. Good. Good. Whether you consider yourself on the left, whether you consider yourself on the right, you should know that these guys are not necessarily functioning in a political way. And if the argument is that you can trust Mueller because Mueller is this kind of third party, he's an impartial, iron jaw, whatever, then is the same not true to investigate FISA abuses? Why is Mueller perfectly okay, but having somebody else to investigate somebody else? I mean, why can't you find somebody else who's also impartial? If the argument that Mueller is just a civil servant, he doesn't have a political bone in his body, he's just there doing a job, just there every day looking for Twitter trolls. If that's the argument, then it sounds, I can see no reason why you would not want to be able to go in, look into the process on how on earth they get a 99.7% rate of approval rate, not just 77% approval rate. What were the pretexts? Why didn't they reveal that information to the judge itself? Certainly the FBI understood that information was originated from the Clinton campaign, or at the very least were links to the Clinton campaign. Why didn't they reveal that information to the judge? That seems something that would be magnificently important. Looking into the case on how Hillary Clinton got off. How on earth could you make an argument to allow Hillary Clinton to get off? Were the agents that was working on one case, in some cases working on the other cases? There's oddities in the way that these cases have been arranged, meaning Donald Trump being put on the hook from the standpoint of Russia, while at the same time Hillary Clinton getting off on the emails of that matter, the Clinton Foundation. So I'm saying this with a certain amount of hesitancy, and I'm putting caveats around it. But on this, yeah, he should open a second special prosecutor. Yes, he should. You should have one investigating Hillary Clinton also. But definitely you should be investigating FISA abuses. Your team, the people on your team are telling you they surveilled this guy. They wiretapped this guy. They laughed at Donald Trump when he said wiretap. Come to find out, Donald Trump was right. No, he was being too specific when he said wiretap. And I understand that in his mind, Donald Trump is like 70-something years old. In his mind, at least I think he is. He's up there. Wiretapped is what they used to call in those old spy films during his day. For all intents and purposes, he just means they were taking my information and they were surveilling my campaign. One of the other parties was surveilling my campaign using the apparatus of government itself on trumped up charges, all originating with the Hillary Clinton campaign. Yes, Jeff Sessions should open up a second special prosecutor. And yes, Jeff Sessions should investigate this. So, if that's what he's doing, good on him for this very specific thing. Leave drugs alone. But yes, on this, you should look into this. I'll leave it at that. Alright guys, if you enjoy the content, feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, you can always support through Patreon. Thanks everyone.